Hey real estate nerds, this is Alex Yoder with Pro Tip Tuesday, my favorite day of the week. And today I want to talk about HB24-1098. For those of you who might have missed the class that we did a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I thought I'd just do a quick under 5-minute video on what you need to be aware of if you're a landlord in Colorado and you are trying to kind of operate under this new law. And just note that there are several bills that you should be aware of, but 1098 is kind of what I'm trying to highlight today. So first of all, this bill is labeled the for-cause eviction bill. This bill is very specifically and primarily for non-renewals. So when the lease is over, you're looking to end the contract, and now under this bill, there's only 6 bona fide reasons for non-renewing a lease. So again, you can't just renew because you don't like the tenant. You can't just renew for arbitrary reasons. You can only renew for these 6 reasons. So number 1, if you are selling your property. Number 2, if you are moving back into your property, you or your family are moving back into your property. Number 3, if the tenant is 3+ times late during the last 12 months. Now there's a lot of caveats to that, which I'll probably go into here, but 3+ times late. If you're doing, number 4, if you're doing substantial repairs or renovations, and there's a lot of caveats to that as well. Number 5, if you are demoing or converting the property, so if you're tearing it down or converting it to like a short-term rental, for example. And number 6, the last reason would be if the tenant was refusing to sign. So you extend an offer to renew them, you give them a reasonable amount of time, they refuse to sign, and now you're non-renewing them because they're refusing to sign. So beyond that, the next biggest thing to be aware of is that you are now required to give a 90-day notice in almost every case if it is a property covered under this law. Now, the law says, and I'm not an attorney, the law says that any leases that are under 12 months under a 12-month period, or any tenancies, more specifically under a 12-month period, are exempt from this bill. So if it's 12 months or more, or they've been in there for 12 months or more, then that's where 1098 would apply. So in this case, you are only able to non-renew under the 6 reasons I gave, and you have to give a 90-day notice. There is a 45-day option, kind of variance, if you are a military person and you or your spouse are moving back into the home. So you can do a slightly shorter notice if you are an active duty military person and you or your spouse are moving back into the home. So at a high level, that's the biggest kind of piece of the puzzle here for what 1098 does. However, there's a couple additional things to be aware of. So first, let me just touch on the 3+ times late reason that I mentioned earlier. So what attorneys are telling us is that basically this bill redefines, for the purposes of this bill only, what late means. And so it's not just your lease says they're due on the 1st, they had 3 times that they paid on the 2nd. Late, as it pertains to this bill, is only if they still haven't paid after the applicable cure period and if you are giving them a notice. So you have to give them a demand notice to cure or quit. That's either going to be, in most cases, is either going to be a 10 or a 30-day notice, depending on if it's a CARES covered property or not, which I've talked about in previous videos. But basically, they would have to pay after three or more times. They'd have to pay after that cure period expires. So let's say you do a 30-day demand notice and you post them on the 3rd of the month. It's going to be darn near 35 days that they'd have to be late for this to be considered one late payment. And so they'd have to do that 3+ times. So the odds of that coming up as a reason to non-renew are pretty slim. The other thing I would like to point out before my 5 minutes are up here and I'm coming up on my time is it completely changes the requirement for serving and posting. Not just for non-renewal notices. It changes the timeline or the requirements for posting basically any demand notices. So even if you're posting for non-payment, it has nothing to do with non-renewal, you're posting for a lease violation, you're going to now have to make multiple attempts on 2 separate days to serve, and then if you can't serve on that second attempt, you can post. Very complicated. Make sure you're talking with your legal counsel to get an updated demand notice and or non-renewal notice that clearly documents the multiple attempts, so you can have proof that that occurred if you end up having that contested. And then lastly, before I finish up my 5 minutes, is you want to make sure that you are cognizant of the new requirement about posting in the tenant's primary language. So let's say they speak Spanish, and you know that they speak Spanish and only Spanish. It would be a good idea to make sure that's not a contest if you have to evict somebody because they're not following your non-renewal, they're not vacating. You would want to post that notice in Spanish and in English. So you'd want to post it in both languages. In all cases, if you're doing a second language, you want to make sure you're posting it in English as well. Again, talk with your attorney. I know that's like what I say in every one of my videos, but talk with your attorney to get all the specifics on these things that I've talked about. But that is my once over, and I'm a little over my time, but hopefully this was helpful. We'll see you next week.